Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today, I was going to go through Budhaditya Yoga, also known as the intelligence combination, and this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective. If you're new to Vedic astrology, also known as Jyotish in Sanskrit, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject or my concepts playlist, they can all be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. I'm big into playlists, so I organize all my talks into different playlists so that they're easier to find. So some of these other playlists might be helpful to you, such as the Planets Grahas playlist, the Houses Bhavas playlist, the Yogas Combinations playlist. Also, if you're the kind of student who likes to look at birth charts and study those, I created a birth chart archive list 2024 video where I list all the famous people, places, and moments in time that I've analyzed on this channel. And it's not obvious, that's why I made this video, because they're usually not one-off videos. They're usually embedded in other videos like my monthly videos where I usually go through two or three famous charts. Also, as far as this video is concerned, these are some other teaching videos that I think would be helpful, to get the most out of this talk. So North, South, and East Indian style charts. I also cover Western style charts in that talk, but it's not part of the title. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. The Lagna, also known as the Ascendant, rising sign or first house. Introduction to the constellations or Rashis, constellation or Rashi categories. Planetary aspects, natural benefic and malefic planets or Grahas, planetary exaltation, debilitation. And I've got some other yogas that I'm going to be kind of sprinkling in here for kind of comparison and contrast. So Parivartana Yoga, exchange of houses, Saraswati Yoga, the artist combination, and Pravraja Yoga, the life focus combination. Okay, so what is Buddhaditya Yoga? What does that even mean? A yoga in astrology, Vedic astrology, means a combination. Like yoking, yoga comes from the same root word as yoke, to bring together. So a yoga is a planetary combination. Buddha is Mercury and Aditya is a sun. So this is a Mercury Sun combination, planetary combination. So what's the definition? Like, how would you identify Buddha-Aditya yoga in somebody's chart? Well, this just means very simply that you have Mercury and Sun in the same sign. That's it. Okay. So that's not all of it. That's kind of just to identify, a quick ID. Um, and what this gives potentially is intelligence, education, and like kind of an analytical ability. Okay. So thing to know though is that if you don't have this combination, it doesn't mean you won't be intelligent or have education or be analytical. There are other ways to get that. So this is just one way. And the other thing to know is that Sun and Mercury, it's actually pretty common for them to be in the same sign because Mercury is a close planet to the Sun, and Mercury is never more than 28 degrees away from the Sun, and each sign is 30 degrees. So what that means is Mercury is never more than one sign away from the Sun. So 1/3 of the time, Mercury and Sun will be in the same sign. So what does that mean? Does that mean 1/3 of people on the planet are intelligent, educated, and very analytical? Not necessarily, right? So what that means is we need to qualify this, very simple, definition of Mercury and Sun in the same sign. So usually the way this is qualified is that does this combination of Sun and Mercury have a relationship with the first house of self and personality and mind? It's a general kind of overall gestalt for the chart. And or does this yoga have a relationship with the fifth house? The fifth house represents intellect. Okay. So let's break this down a little bit. So what do we mean by relationship? I mean, that's kind of vague in a way. Okay, so one, Mercury or Sun could own or be a ruler of either the first house or the fifth house. Okay, it's kind of the first way to have a relationship with it. Okay. And the other thing is that the yoga, so Sun and Mercury, must also be in a positive house. So positive houses are Pretty much any house except 3, 6, 8, and 12. Most people would say. I mean, there's always discrepancy, right? But the negative houses are typically 5, 8. Sorry, I'm looking at this chart. 3, 6, 8, and 12. Okay. So if Mercury and Sun are in any other house and Mercury or Sun owns the first house or the fifth house, so to own the first or the first house by Mercury or Sun, that means that it's either a Gemini or Virgo rising or a Leo rising. And for the fifth house, what would that mean? So Gemini in the fifth would be 2, 1, 12. Aquarius rising. Leo would be Aries rising. And Virgo would be, can I do this backwards? 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, Taurus rising. Okay. So basically half the rising signs could potentially own, where half the rising signs, Mercury or Sun, could either own the first or the fifth house. But then again, is this yoga going on in a positive house? Okay. Now, in the cases in the other 6 Rashis or rising signs, Lagnas, where Mercury or Sun does not own the first or the fifth house, is the yoga happening in the first or the seventh, fifth or the 11th? So why those houses? Well, one, because the yoga itself is in the first house. The other thing is if it's not in the first house, if it's in the seventh house, it's aspecting the first house. So it has a relationship with the first house. And then the same with the 5-11 axis. So is the yoga happening in the fifth house? That's a clearer relationship. If it's happening in the 11th house, both Sun and Mercury are aspecting the fifth house. Okay. Now, in addition to this, are the Grahas strong? I mean, that's important, right? You got to be a little bit careful with Mercury because it's so close to the Sun, if it's in the same sign, there's a very good chance it'll be combust. So, and the thing is with a combust planets, the thing about that is that outer manifestations of Mercury will be a problematic, but actually inner qualities such as intelligence, such as analytical ability, might actually be stronger. So mercurial combustion is not considered a weakness in this particular combination. But what would be a weakness? Well, Mercury and maybe Pisces, because Mercury's debilitated in Pisces. If Mercury is debilitated in Pisces and it's combust, well, that might be a problem. What about Sun? Was Sun in Virgo? Oh, not Sun in Virgo, sorry, Sun in Libra, because Sun is debilitated in Libra, right? The other thing is that if, these planets, again, if they're in the same house, are they afflicted by malefic planets? So the malefics being Mars, Saturn, Ketu, Rahu. Okay, and they would potentially either be conjoined or aspected by these malefics, because the other thing is that Mercury, if you watch my video on malefic and benefic, natural malefic and benefic planets, Mercury can swing either way depending on what other planets are around it or influencing it. So if you get all these malefic planets aspecting or conjoined with Sun and Mercury, then Mercury is going to become more and more malefic. Okay. The other thing is that the house, first and the fifth house, should be strong, especially the one that the yoga is related to. So maybe Sun and Mercury are okay, there's no malefics on it, and they're okay. But maybe there are a bunch of, maybe the Lord of the fifth house is combust and debilitated. Then that's a problem. Got it? Okay, so you have to go through these other layers. Now, this is the thing. I mean, I haven't actually seen this information that I'm presenting anywhere. I'm going to present it. So, the thing is, you always want to do these analyses of yogas and stuff like that in context, in a greater context of the chart. Okay. So, another way that you might get a Budhaditya yoga is actually through parivartana. Okay. At least a parivartana might save, like for example, in this chart that I have here, this is a chart of one of my clients. You can see the Sun and Mercury are together in the same house, but it's the 12th house. So it's a negative house. Okay. And the thing though is that you do have a relationship with the first house here because Mercury's lord of the first house, because you have Gemini here, that's 3 in the bottom corner of the first house. The first house, this is a North Indian style chart, so the first house is the diamond in the top center. And then to get to the second house, you go backwards, so counterclockwise. So Sun and Mercury in the 12th house. Mercury does own the first house, so there's a relationship there. But you can see the Sun and Mercury combination is not in a positive house, and that's the first kind of potential criteria. Okay. Sun and Mercury are not particularly strong. There is actually, I didn't put it in here. Maybe I should add that in there. Hopefully I remember. Saturn is actually with Sun and Mercury. The first house I would say is pretty strong though, because you do have all these benefics on the 1-7 axis. So you have Venus retrograde, Jupiter retrograde, SWA, and Moon, and you can see it's almost a full moon here. And Mars is there, but Mars is like an ordinary condition. So there's all these benefics on the first house. So that's positive. It's just that the Budhaditya yoga is in the 12th house. However, if you notice, there's a parivartana there's an exchange of houses between Venus and Mercury. So Venus is in a sign of Mercury and Mercury's in a sign of Venus. So you can kind of in your mind swap those planets, which would bring more Mercury basically into the first house here. Um, so there would be a stronger relationship with Mercury and the first house, and Mercury would be strong because Mercury, especially Mercury in a Gemini Lagna or a rising sign, not only is Mercury in its own sign strengthening the house, but Mercury has Digbal or directional strength in the first house. So with that Parivartana, Mercury is really quite strong. Okay, so there's a possibility here. I just put this chart up. And the thing is, this chart is for somebody who was a graduate student. So when they went through their sun period, they were a graduate student and studying basic sciences, doing research. So you can see the sun is off in the corner here in the 12th house of isolated places. They were working in a lab, in an isolated lab in the basement. So, but studying, whatever, molecular biology or whatever they're doing. This person also happens to be a doctor. So they spent, especially with this Mercury Venus Parivartana, this person has often been involved with overseas activities like almost like a Doctors Without Borders type thing, you know. Yeah, so anyway. What else? Oh, and then the fifth house, since we're looking at this chart, the fifth house is also strong because you can see the fifth house lord is Venus. The fifth house is a little 7 in the corner. That means the seventh zodiac sign or Libra. Libra is owned or ruled by Venus. Venus is retrograde, which gives it strength. The other thing is you have this massive retrograde Jupiter SWA on the Venus, and you have a full moon on the Venus. I mean, that's also going to give you a lot of other yogas. That gives you a Hamsa yoga, Jupiter in its own sign, and a positive house. That's going to give you a Hamsa yoga, so very spiritual yoga. It's also going to give you a Gajah yoga, so a networking combination here, which is another video that I've done if you want to learn about that. All right, so I would say here in this chart, the fifth house is quite strong. First house, very strong. The only thing is that Sun and Mercury are in the 12th house, but when you have this Parivartana, it's almost there. So I would take that as a a qualified Buddhaditya yoga. Okay. The other thing is that, again, evaluating any sort of yoga in context, the other thing to know is like, did the person, like if you're looking at somebody's chart and they have a Buddhaditya yoga and you've qualified, it's like, okay, yeah, first, there's a relationship with the Buddhaditya yoga, first house, fifth house, they're all strong, no massive, onslaught of malefics, blah, blah. Does this person ever run either Sun or Mercury? Because, again, since we're talking about yogas here, if somebody maybe because Mercury it goes Mercury was it Mercury K2 Venus Sun, so maybe somebody was born in like Moon, And then you go Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, and those are all long, periods of time. So maybe somebody never gets to their Mercury period or their Sun period. Then maybe the Budhaditya yoga won't really give somebody any, much, if anything. So did the person run the dasha or not? That's important to know. Um, and then the other thing, this also gets back to, are the grahas or the planets strong? Because if Sun is debilitated, if Mercury's, debilitated and combust or whatever, um, for any kind of yoga to give the fullness of what it can give, the planets in the yoga have to be strong. So, okay, yeah, okay. Then what else? So also again, more context here is what is the, quality of the person's mind generally, not just the because we're talking mostly about analytical intelligence here, kind of that calculating intelligence. Like this person worked in a lab and they're a doctor. I mean, a lot of science, you know. Um, um, if this person had a different combination, because they do have Moon and Jupiter together. I didn't put Rahu and Ketu in there, but Rahu and Ketu aren't on these planets here. Um, maybe this person would be more of a psychologist, like Moon and Jupiter together. This could be like child psychology potentially, you know. Um, but anyway, like you want to also evaluate the whole total sum of somebody's mind. What kind of mind do they have? Are they more of like a creative type? Is that how their mind churns? Is that what their mind, conjures up? Does this person have like a steady mind? Because if they're not steady, if they're not focused, if their mind's all over the place, then they won't be able to, um, produce much here. But that might also get down to, again, are there a bunch of, malefics on this yoga or on these houses? Okay. So if you're going to evaluate mind, you want to evaluate not just the first house and the fifth house, but also the eighth house of deep psychology. That'll tell you a lot about somebody. Also, the moon. Moon's not part of this Buddha-Ditya yoga, but the strength of the moon, is it new? It's going to be weak. If is it full, it's going to be stronger. Is it eclipsed? It's going to be weak. Is it in its own sign? Stronger. Is it in its debilitation sign, Scorpio? Weaker. And then also what nakshatra is, because that's going to give you kind of a flavor or quality for how the mind is churning. Like is Sun or Mercury in a nakshatra of Anuradha? A nakshatra is a lunar mansion, so every night the moon moves into a different nakshatra. So there are 27 nakshatras. So a lunar month is 27 and a half nights or days. So the moon shifts. And so each of these nakshatras has a different symbol. So Anuradha nakshatra is symbolized by a victory gate, but it's the kind of victory that you get by building bridges and building alliances. I mean, that's a pretty nice, potential yoga to have, you know, or, is this, Uh, again, depending on the condition of the planets, are either of these planets in something like Swati nakshatra. I've talked about Swati quite a few times. Swati nakshatra is like it's the symbol of that is like new grass blowing in the wind. So there's kind of like fragile quality to it, and I've mentioned in my videos that a lot of times when I see people with really strong placements in Swati, they can be a really nervous, anxious type person. Like you literally can almost see them, shaking sometimes. Like their mind is always churning and worrying and, you know, um, trying to prevent catastrophes from happening. I've seen a lot. So, is that the quality of their mind? Because again, if they're that nervous, then that anxiety and nervousness is going to drain the mental energy, and they may not be showing up as like a true genius, an analytical genius, The other thing to note is that, maybe somebody's highly intelligent, but maybe they have other factors affecting things like their education and career. Maybe there are other things in their chart showing that they don't get educated. So even though this yoga does say education, it's like, what kind of education? Like, is it just learning from your family? Is it, going on to like a PhD? Is it like a trade, shop type thing? So for education and career, you want to be looking at second house. This is, what you learn from your family. Third house, this is like artisan type stuff. Fourth house, again, family line. Ninth and a fourth house is also like college level. A ninth house is like higher education, like master's, PhD level. Also the 24th Amsha divisional chart, subchart, because that's a whole subchart on education. Career, you could do the 10th Amsha. And then, potentially, are there other yogas involved? Because, like, if somebody has a Saraswati yoga, I would think that they would also be a fairly creative person. So then you got to weigh out, like, is this person more of like a creative type or an analytical type? And they might be both. You never know. I mean, maybe that's their genius, is that that they're good either way, right? So, again, even though we start off with just Mercury and Sun in the same sign, you've got to think through a lot of other stuff here to see or determine what, if anything, or how much this Budhaditya is going to give. And again, it's important to qualify. That's also important because again, every third person potentially has this Budhaditya yoga in their chart, just based on statistics. Okay, so I thought what I do now is give you some charts to look at, and you can see, if you can see, or at least try to see, is there a Budhaditya and is it qualified or not? Okay, so I have a few slides here and a bunch of different charts and just a short list, okay, of the next four charts. One is a hairstylist, one is a diplomat, one is a physicist, and one's a computer scientist. Right. So let's look at the first chart on the left here. Okay, so you can see this is a Gemini rising chart, that little 3 in the corner of the rising sign there. Okay, so this chart is kind of similar to the one I just showed you of the scientist doctor. Okay. So they have a Buddha-ditya yoga. It's in the 12th house. There is a relationship between the first house and the Buddha-ditya because Mercury owns that. There isn't a Parivartana here, but look at this. You've got this, what is it? Jupiter-Venus combination on the 5-11 axis. So you've got Jupiter in the 5th house, and you have Venus aspecting the 5th house, which it owns. And it just so happens that Jupiter and Venus are the two counseling planets. Okay. So this 5th house is massively strong for advising. Okay. The other thing is that you have on the 1st house, you have Mars in the 1st house. You have Saturn aspecting the 1st house. Okay, because Saturn aspects 10 away, and then you have Jupiter aspecting the 1st house. So you have a Mars, Saturn, Jupiter combination in the 1st house. I wouldn't say that's particularly strong, but when you get Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter together, my mind goes through to somebody who's like structuring the law. And as I mentioned in the previous chart of this person, the other person, the doctor who did some overseas work, because their Buddhaditya was placed in the 12th house, this person also has their Buddhaditya in the 12th house. So interested in foreign affairs. So this first chart on the left is actually the one of the diplomat, and this is the chart of actually Henry Kissinger. I don't know if you know of him. He's passed away, but he was a very famous diplomat. I don't know when he was around, in the 70s, I want to say. A U.S. diplomat, was very instrumental in a lot of U.S. foreign affairs. Was considered to be like hugely bright, intelligent. Um, so again, the only thing missing there is that the Buddhaditya is in the 12th house, but that's kind of where his genius and calculations lied. And then the other thing is that this massive Jupiter Venus in the aspect in his 5th house, he was just born to be a counselor and an advisor, which is what he was. He was an advisor to the president. Um, So then the second chart here on the right. So again, we have another Gemini rising. Now we have Sun, Venus, Mercury retrograde in the 1st house. So we have a true Buddhaditya yoga. We have Sun and Mercury in the same house, and the Buddhaditya is in the 1st house. Mercury is in its own sign. It is retrograde, so Swa, it's going to be strong there. Retrograde, it's strong there. It's also got Digbala, directional strength, strong there. In this chart, I didn't list it here, but actually Mercury's combust, which won't affect the Budhaditya yoga. Um, and let's see, the 3 planets in the first house there, that'll give a Pravaraja yoga. That'll give a like a life focus combination of the first house and first house issues. So things like person, personality, self development. The other thing is that you have Saturn aspecting there. This Buddhaditya yoga, that's going to bring it down a little bit. And you do have Moon aspecting there. With Venus and Moon together on the 1-7 axis, this is potentially, working with women. This is also like aesthetics. Venus and Moon are the aesthetics, like arts, stuff like that. The other thing, this person has a Saraswati yoga, which is an education planet, but also a creativity planet. Okay. So with this combination, this is the hairstylist. Quite an intelligent hairstylist. The thing that was with them, you can see in the what is it? The fourth house here. You have Jupiter and Saturn. Um, this Saturn is actually going to, how do I say? It's going to decrease the possibility of higher education for this person. And this person didn't went to trade school, for hairstyling, but I don't think did too much beyond that. You can also see that in Harry Kissinger's chart, Moon and Saturn there. Um, so there probably were issues there with education, but I'm not sure with Harry Kissinger. Let me just check if there was something else. Yeah, I don't know. It might just be that this Venus was so strong because you can see that in his chart, um, with Venus aspecting its own sign with Jupiter there, and Venus being the lord of the house that Mercury's in, you know, um, that's going to bring more of that kind of international advising piece. Okay. So, again, you have 2 different charts here, both intelligent people in different ways. I would say that again, the diplomat is more about foreign affairs because of where their Buddhaditya is placed and the Jupiter Venus in the 5th house the house of advising with the 2 advisory planets there. I would say that the hairstylist, their sort of genius, if you will, or kind of analytical way, is all about business and independent business because Mercury is the planet that represents business, and clearly Mercury is, I would say Mercury is the strongest planet in their chart. So yeah. All right, so let's go through a couple more charts. So again, just so you see like um how these things can play out, and they don't always they're not always like crisp, in terms of, oh, it meets all the criteria. This is a clear one. Because clearly Henry Kissinger was a massively intelligent guy. The thing that was that for him, that's one of the things I wanted to go through or mention here is that his kind of genius might have been a little bit different from the Buddha Ditya Yoga type, you know. But the hairstylist, you can see, I don't think there's a lot of math going on, but there was a lot, there had a lot to do with chemistry, with the hair dyes and, relaxers and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, you can, again, just compare and contrast different charts. Let's look at a couple more. Okay, so another 2 charts. So we saw the hairstylist, we saw the diplomat. Now these 2, one's a physicist and one's a computer scientist. So see if you can tell before I tell you the answer. So on the left, we have Taurus rising, right? The 2 in the bottom corner. The second zodiac sign is Taurus, ruled by Venus. And Venus has gone to the 2nd house where it is with Sun and Mercury. So you have a Buddhaditya yoga in the 2nd house. That's a positive house. The other things that Mercury owns, so the Lagna, the lord of the chart, has is involved with this Budhaditya, but the other thing is Mercury owns the fifth house. So there is a relationship between the Budhaditya and the fifth house. Let me see. So the other thing is this Sun, Mercury, Venus combination in the second house is going to give very strong life focus for second house issues, which include technology. Okay. Now, again, like I said, you want to look at the whole chart here to see, were there even like chances of education. Now you can see that the Mars is in the third house where it's debilitated, but it's aspecting the ninth house of higher education here where it's exalted. So yeah, this person had extended, higher education. Um, and then if we look at the fifth house a little bit more to see, is the fifth house strong? Well, the fifth house lord is Mercury. Mercury is Swa in its own sign, Gemini in the second house. So yeah, the lord of the fifth house is strong. What else is going on in the fifth house here? Well, you have Moon with Ketu. So, it's not eclipsed, and I would say this is a fullish moon, not a full moon, but yeah, or at least a bright moon, because it's, four houses away. It's about halfway between new and full, so at least a bright moon. But you do have moon with K2. The thing that was what this moon and K2 is going to bring this person is imagination regarding the second house affairs here. So this first chart here is the chart of Alan Turing, who, if you haven't heard of him, he is considered to be the inventor of the first computer, and he was also involved with the English government in terms of breaking the German code during, what was it, World War One or World War Two, using his computer stuff. And he was like a total kind of, strange, oddball character type, but a genius nonetheless. And this Mars aspecting the ninth house as well. This would give him, I don't know when he was born, what job period he ran, but that Mars exalted in the ninth house would potentially give him some kind of career related to government or politics. Okay. And then this last chart here, this is our physicist, because that's the only one left. We have another Gemini rising here. So that's also kind of nice because I gave you mostly Gemini charts, not to bore you with Gemini people, but so you can compare and contrast their different Buddhaditya yogas. You can see this one, this person also has a clear Buddhaditya yoga of Sun and Mercury. Mercury's retrograde. In the 10th house, Mercury's debilitated here in the 12th house, which I mentioned before, which might be a problem. However, Venus is also here, and Venus is exalted in the 12th house. Because Venus is exalted in the 12th house, it kind of cancels to some degree the debilitation of Mercury. So this exalted Venus pulls up the Mercury here. So that helps a lot. The other thing is that Mercury owns the first house. So there's a relationship there. And Venus, which is involved sort of in the middle of this Buddhaditya yoga, even though it's not the base of the Buddhaditya yoga, it's involved here. Venus is the lord of the fifth house here. And you can see that this person, the four planets in the 10th house here, Sun, Venus, Saturn, and Mercury. You can see this is a Pravraja yoga, life focus video, a yoga combination, planetary combination. And the 10th house represents things like career and fame, but it also represents the sky. You can also see here Mars and Rahu in the 10th house, or sorry, not in the 10th, in the 8th house in the 10th constellation of Capricorn. Mars is exalted there. So Mars and Rahu here, and this kind of 8th house, this is someone who's deep into research. Deep into research. So we have research and sky. So this second chart here is actually the chart of Albert Einstein. So noted physicist who's considered, even his face, right? Even his picture is sort of like, oh, genius. That's how smart this guy was. So, yeah, so you can see that the Buddhaditya, the really clear Buddhadityas are like the more clearly like science, math, calculating, analytical types. Um, I haven't done a ton of research on this, so I can't say. I mean, I haven't gone through like 1,000 charts to say, oh, it's only this kind, it's only this kind of intelligence. Um, but you can see like there are differences here. All right, so let's go on to more. All right, so here's a chart here. Okay, so on the left we have the natal chart, and then I've got two of the subcharts here. So now we're going to go, again, just look for context. Okay, but let's start with the natal chart here. So you can see Mercury and Sun are not in the same sign. So okay, bing, like no Budhaditya. Okay, but don't give up on me yet. There's a reason why I gave you this chart. Okay, so what do we have in this chart? Well, the rising sign is Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is in its own house. So this is going to be a person who has a strong personality, has resilience, also has quite a bit of charm. Yeah. What else do they have? And this chart is quite a bit like the doctor's chart that I showed you, where, not Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, but you can see Sun is in the 12th house. So there's some probably foreign, it depends on if they're running these planets, but if they ran Sun, which they did, during the Sun period, you might expect that this person would be, if not overseas, involved in overseas affairs or foreign affairs or international trade, or maybe in some kind of isolated place, like I mentioned, that doctor worked in a lab for a while, a medical lab for a while. Okay. The thing is, you do, in a way, because Mercury is the lord of the 12th house here, you will be pulling these 12th house issues into the first house of personality. So I would guess that this person was quite charismatic. Um, and also, like you can see like Mercury, Venus, aspected by a retrograde Jupiter, kind of like that doctor. Mars here. So this is quite a bit like this is going to be somebody who has a lot of, I think, emotional intelligence, a lot of charm, really strong personality, who is, I think, fairly well intended. Yeah. What else do you have here? Oh, the other thing. So Venus is Swa in its own sign here. The other thing is you have Moon in its own sign here. So Venus, again, being a arts planet, relationship, emotional planet, very strong. Moon in its own sign, also an emotional planet, also an arts planet. There's a person, again, charismatic, international affairs, personality, emotional, creative. They do also have, you can see here, with the Venus in its own sign and a Kendra. The Kendras of the four houses in the middle. It's going to be a Malavya yoga, so it's going to be a very strong Venus. The other thing is that this person has a Saraswati yoga because they have Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter all in Kendra's, Trichona's, or the second house. So again, what I'm getting from this chart, kind of like the hairstylist, is this is going to be somebody who probably very successful, but kind of in a different way. I'm guessing this person wasn't involved like in a lab or science, but something involving people and relationships. Okay. So just a little bit of background. I don't have to give you everything away, but this person was born into the dasha of Mercury Saturn. So they started off, running one of the planets in their first house. And then when they got to age 35, that's when this moon in its own sign was active because that was the moon Mahadasha. And then at age 45, they started with this Mars. They started the Mars Mahadasha. Okay. Now let's again, as I mentioned, this does look like a very successful person, but maybe in a slightly different way than Budhaditya type analysis, calculating analysis type. Not that they couldn't do it, but I'm not sure that's really their major strength. But if we look at the D24, so this is a subdivisional chart specific for education. You can see that the rising sign is the same. It's also a Libra Lagna, which means it's an important house. But you can see that if this person started their birth dasha in Mercury, Mercury's not well placed. After Mercury comes K2. K2 is Swa. We do use K2 Swa in the Amsha, so K2 is strong. But K2 is a pretty short period of time. It was like during grammar school, I think, for this person. Then after K2 comes Venus. Venus is exalted, which is great, but it's in a negative house. And it's not parivartan with Jupiter. Then after Venus, look, you've got Sun in its own sign in the 11th house. So Sun represents things like authority, leadership, and the 11th house represents things like money and clubs, group, society. But you see after Sun, then you go to Moon, which is in a negative house, Mars, and so actually this D24 overall is not very like impressive, I would say, overall. Um, K2 period when they were in grammar school, I mean, but I don't know. Was this person somebody who, I don't know, went to Harvard or something when they were 10? Um, yeah, I don't know. Probably not. Although you can see that if we go back to the natal chart, the fourth house here is ruled by Capricorn, and 10 in the corner is the 10th zodiac sign of Capricorn, and Saturn aspects into that sign. So it does look like this person is going to get some level of higher education. Whether it's like all the way PhD or not, yeah, I don't know. But at least some, college level type stuff. So, um, and this would also fit potentially because if this person started moon at age 35, then sun period was going to be right before that. So the sun in its own sign in the 11th house in the D24 was going to be active um, and, producing probably good education during the years that people usually get higher level education, like in their 20s. That's when most people go to graduate school, not everybody, but. Okay, but you can see the D24 is sort of like, I mean, Sun was pretty good. K2, again, this person was young. So, and then the other planet's not very impressive. Then I thought, okay, so probably some education, but, you know, what about their career? I mean, they do have this moon and its own sign in the 10th house. And if you look at the D10 of career and fame, so this is subchart for career and fame, this is, again, worse than the D24. So, because you have what? K2, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, Venus, Mars, Sun, 7 out of 10 planets are in negative houses. I mean, this is kind of like this person even, when you look at it this way, if you're not really putting the pieces together, like, could this person even get a job? It's almost like, or were they constantly unemployed, or, what was going on here? Um, so, yeah, I mean, maybe the D10 is wrong, but again, this is another subchart where you're just like, okay, what's this person really about? What's going on? How did they make it through life? Did they just, you know, um, uh, make it through on their charm and charisma? Well, maybe a little bit, yeah. So hold on, let me switch to the next slide here. So the chart on the left is the same. The first two charts, the D24 of education, the D10 career, are the same. Now I've added in the D11. So this is going to clear things up. Okay. If we had any doubts here. So the D11 is the subchart for income and also social support. The D11 is a very important chart for anybody who's involved in politics and anybody who when we're talking about the social support piece, it's also important for anybody who's going to get a lot of awards. So if their D11 was very strong, um, I would expect potentially any sort of public voting, democratically voted in, um, a type person, whatever scenario that might be, or like awards, like a lot of the Grammy, the singers and stuff like that, or actresses and stuff like that who win all those awards, they usually have like a crazy D11, very strong D11. Let's look at this person's D11. So, first of all, you see this green arrow going back and forth, double-sided arrow. So Jupiter and Mercury are in Parivartana. There's an exchange of houses there. That means Jupiter's super strong and Mercury's super strong. Now, look at the four Kendras in the middle are all Jupiter or Mercury owned signs. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets with really strong dispositors, which means like landlords. Okay, and these are all in the Kendras. This is a very already like kind of a crazy D11. But there's more. Okay, there's more. Then let's look at Venus and Sun. Those are not well placed, but if we look a little deeper, Venus is in a sign of Sun, and Venus is in a sign of oh, what did I say? Venus is in a sign of Sun, and Sun is in a sign of Venus. So there's a Parivartana. There's a second Parivartana here between Venus and Sun. So even though they're still in negative houses, they're going to be a lot stronger. So, so that's going to bring them up. And then what's kind of left? So what's left is this Mars debilitated in the fifth house. So I'm guessing this person was not necessarily the greatest counselor. However, you've got Mars aspecting into its sign of exaltation in the 11th house of clubs, groups, societies, and also income. This person was a massive organizer, political organizer, and also resource organizer. So if this chart looks familiar to you at all, you will know that this chart is actually the chart of Mohandas K. Gandhi. So the person primarily responsible for the independence of India from the British Raj. So, so if we're talking about Gandhi here, I mean, that's also kind of funny to me is that, again, if we go back to the beginning where we're talking about like 1 out of every 3 people has a Budhaditya yoga, and this one doesn't. But clearly, this guy had, something going on upstairs to free India from the British Raj. So, yeah, again, all hope is not lost, I guess is the bottom line. Because sometimes I see people are like, oh, well, I don't have this or I don't have that, or it's like, I mean, this guy has a Malavi yoga, he's got a Saraswati yoga. Looks like he's also got a Gajakesari yoga, so, so he's a networker. He's got a Ravraja yoga. I mean, he's got a lot of yogas here, and he's got strong planets. So that's why his planets gave so much to him. And then I wrote down here with the Spurtasha, oh, the moon. So the moon, he started running moon at the age of 35. So what happened, and that's when he was running this moon in its own sign with Rahu in the 10th house. So this moon with Rahu, so this is kind of like Rahu is an ambition planet and moon is a public. And Cancer, so especially these Libra, Lagna, rising sign people, they tend to be involved with public works because Cancer is their 10th house. This is somebody who's going to be leading the public, masterminding the public. To some degree, you could see from this chart, like I was talking about, like charisma and strength, and all this kind of stuff, resilience. I mean, this is kind of a Pied Piper type of chart. He's gonna be so I was sort of joking about him like living off of his charisma, but he sort of did in a way. I mean, you could see his D24 is not super great. D10 is like surprisingly bad considering who he was and what he accomplished. But then you see like it all comes back from the D11 here. So at the age of 35, that's when he was involved in politics in South Africa and was protesting. I think that was his first big protest when they said that persons of Indian and Chinese descent had to register separately or something like that. And that's when he introduced the concept of satyagraha, or speaking the truth, and also the ahimsa, like nonviolent protest. That was his first big kind of demonstration right when he was starting the moon Mahadasha, which is when this massive moon in the 10th house was active, when he started organizing people. Okay. So again, you're seeing this organizing people, leading people in the 4th house or 10th house of his natal chart. And then you also get this like massive uh, Mars, exalted in the 11th house in the D11, which is, strong in many other ways. Um, Then I said, oh, he went into Mars at age 45. So then we're going back to the first house here, which is super strong for him. So, he's going to be charismatic, but also Mars is a leadership planet, but like a rebellious planet. So he's going to be running Mars here. And what happened at the age of 45? That's when somebody called him back to India and he started on the Indian independence crusade. So even with just a little bit of information here about his chart and a few subcharts and when he started some of these dashas, things just kept lighting up for him because again, part of it is like the moon was so strong and Venus was so strong, and then the D11's like crazy strong. So again, Budhaditya yoga, but qualify it and put it in a context and to see what it can give. All right, as always, I want to thank you for your time and stopping by to listening to one of my talks. All my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology can be found in my concepts playlist. I also have that birth chart archive list 2024 video you can check out if you want to see other birth charts, famous birth charts. I do offer personal birth chart readings live on Zoom or as pre-recorded video. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. And I have another YouTube channel on natural medicine, which covers other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, as well as other paradigms of natural medicine, such as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And that name of the channel is called Nature Source Care. So that's out there too. So as always, I want to, thank you for your time, but also I hope you found this talk helpful and useful and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. Right, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.